me see if they let me do it. Or what? Add photos to your camera roll to get started. It's already added. What are you talking about? Yeah, I'm not really sure how to do this. I mean, technically, I can put it on this, what I got over here, the ring light, and have it standing looking at the camera. I wanted to be able to put the actual pages on the background so y'all can be able to follow with me, read along with me, because some of these words, which we're gonna read along, I'm actually gonna pronounce them in the English way of pronouncing the words instead of the actual Nawash way of pronouncing them. When you speak Nawash, I'm still learning it, so so I don't want to speak it like I'm mad fluent or anything and just be butchering the words. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna start it. I'm just gonna read it in the English way of reading it, and if anybody want to learn how to pronounce some of these names or words in the correct way, just reach out to me, or you can look it up, man. It's out here. There's ways you can find out how to do this. I'm kind of contemplating whether I want to put it facing the computer screen so y'all can see the actual book I'm reading on the computer screen, or if I want to just have y'all looking at me while I'm reading. I kind of don't want to have y'all just, I ain't that type of person to just be in the damn screen, have people staring at me and shit. That's why I really don't go live. If y'all can't tell, I'm kind of like an introvert. But yeah, so I don't know whether I should, if anybody in here, let me know if you rather have me have the camera facing towards the screen so y'all can actually see the book and try to follow along with me, or y'all just don't care and because the word, and I'm saying that only because some of the words that I'm going to be pronouncing may not be the correct pronunciation. So I am going to butcher some words. I'm not going to speak it in the correct way of speaking the language with some of these words. I'm going to pronounce it in the English way, but it's my first time doing this shit on YouTube. So what's good, family? Appreciate everybody for tapping in. So let me know whether y'all put a one in the chat for me if y'all want to have the camera, because I try to do it on a green screen, but for some reason it's not popping up. This is my first time using YouTube Live, so I really don't really know how to work it too smooth. But I can have the camera facing towards the book while I'm reading, or it could be facing towards me and I'm gonna be looking at the book, so y'all really ain't gonna be seeing me. I mean, tell me, how old are you? That don't matter, bro. We ain't here for that. Ask me how old are you. What's wrong with him? Hey, cuz. All right. Hey, man. No. Peace, love, and power to all my people. Everybody come in and learn. We're gonna read together. I guess I ain't seen nobody put it in the chat whether y'all want me to. All right. I don't know what you want, cuz. Some other shit. Mustafa. We ain't doing that, bro. I'm just gonna read it. I guess I was gonna have it facing towards the screen, but I can't drop the green screen, so we're gonna play it like that. And I might just flip it around so y'all can see certain words. Bro, get out. All right, you's a weirdo. You gotta get out of here. You asked me my age. That was the first weird question. And you just keep going, bro. I'll get you out of here. Hi, user on this channel. Put user in timeout. Put your ass in timeout. You got a 30-minute timeout, but what's wrong with you? All right. Weird. All right, so we're gonna start it like this. So the book that we're reading from is called, I've been making content from this book for a couple years now, to be real. But the book that we're reading from is the fundamental principles of old world and new world civilizations. This book is basically going to cover ancient Yucatan, ancient Mexico, belief systems, the whole nine. One evening in February 1898, I left my desk and stepped into the window, looked out at Polaris and the circumpolar region of the sky with a newly awakened and eager interest. For 13 years, I have been studying and collecting material with the hope of obtaining some understanding of the calendar, religion, and cosmogony of the ancient Mexicans, but had hitherto purposely refrained from formulating or expressing any conclusions on the latter subjects, having felt unable to extract a clear and satisfactory understanding of the native beliefs from the chaotic mass of accumulated data under which they lay like the ruin of an ancient temple. Though frequently discouraged, I had, however, never ceased to pursue my research and to note carefully the slightest indication or suggestion which might prove of ultimate value. Becoming utterly absorbed in the collection of such notes, I have found no time to publish anything during the last 4 years, though realizing with regret that those interested in my work might be disappointed at my delay in issuing the papers announced. In 1894, as speedily forthcoming, slowly but steadily, however, I was gaining ground. Various excursions along new lines of research increased my experience and in crossing and recrossing the field of ancient Mexico. I frequently had occasion to observe certain familiar landmarks from a point of view and illuminated by rays of fresh light proceeding from recently acquired sources. It was remarkable how often facts which had seemed so hopelessly complicated finally appeared to be quite simple and comprehensible. This was noticeably the case with the Aztec deities, which for years had seemed to me as numberless. Now pay attention to this part right quick. Right, so this is important. So she said, and it's the author is a woman who wrote this as well. I'll get y'all her name later if y'all interested. Forgot her name. Another, something like that. This was noticeably the case with the Aztec deities, which for years had seemed to me as numberless. After closely studying their respective symbols and attributes and names during several consecutive months and subjecting them to a final minute analysis, I found that their number dwindled in a remarkable way and also verified the truth of the statement made by the anonymous author of the Biblioteca Nacional manuscript, which I was editing, that the Mexicans painted one and the same god under different aspect with different colors, according to the various names they gave him in each instance. So I'm gonna read that part again because that's a jewel right there, right? Because a lot of people, even the people today who call themselves Mexicans and all of that shit, right? They don't know this. They think it's a whole bunch of different deities, whole bunch of different gods that these people practice polytheism or something like that. It's not true, right? The thing is one supreme creator and it's different representations of him. And everything is connected because as you're going to learn as we cover this book, they practice the as above, so below, as within, so without, as the soul, so the universe, right? Which means everything is connected from the agriculture from the astronomy to the agriculture to the waters to what's inside our body, what's under the earth. Everything plays its part. But let me go back to that part, right? So she said, this was noticeably the case with the Aztec deities, which for years has seemed to me as numberless. After closely studying their respective symbols, attributes, and names during several consecutive months and subjecting them to a final minute analysis, I found that their number dwindled in a remarkable way and also verified the truth of the statement made by the anonymous author of the Biblioteca Nacional manuscript, which I was editing, that the Mexicans painted one and the same God under different aspect with different colors, according to the various names which they gave him in each instance. It was particularly interesting to find that in assuming that certain names designated different deities. Let me read that sentence over. It was particularly interesting to find that in assuming, keyword, in assuming that certain names designated different native deities, the early Spanish writers had committed a mistake as great as though someone reading the litany of the Virgin in the Catholic prayer book for the first time inferred that it was a series of invocations addressed to the distinct divinities among whom the figure, morning star, a mirror of justice, and a mythical rose, etc. So what that part basically said was, um, when the Spaniards came over here and they was trying to figure out what the Aboriginals over here was doing, what their different quote unquote deities meant, they thought they meant something different, right? Just like someone who will be reading the Catholic Bible or whatever Bible, right, and hearing the Morning Star, Mirror of Justice, and Mythical Rose, and thinking those are three different people, which they are just three different representations of the same person, right? An examination of the text, because let me go back to that, because Mary was called all three of those in the Bible. For those that don't know, she was referred to as the morning star, just like Jesus was, just like quote unquote Lucifer was, right? A mirror of justice and a mystical rose, right? I put that out on TikTok. I'm not sure if I put it out on my YouTube, but yeah, let's continue. An examination of text of several native prayers preserved established that the Mexicans addressed their prayers to a supreme creator and a ruler. Let me rewind back to that. An examination of the text of several native prayers preserved established that the Mexicans, when I say Mexicans, I'm talking about the ancient Mexicans. I'm not talking about these Spaniard, Filipino, Mongoloid people, right? An examination of the text of several native prayers preserved established that the Mexicans addressed their prayers to a supreme creator and ruler whom they termed invincible, incomprehensible, and impalpable, and revered as the father and mother of all, right? Because as above, so below, the focal point of that is balance, right? And the masculine and the feminine coming together creates the balance and divinity, right? That's divine, right? That's like when a man and a woman come together, that's divine, right? That's what the Most High or the Creator want us to do, right? It's a whole bunch of different aspects of that I could go into, but I'm gonna leave it there for now. All right. So the creator and ruler whom they turned invincible, incomprehensible, and impalpable and revered as the father and mother of all. Some of their so-called idols were, after all, either attempts to represent in objective form the attributes of the divine power, the forces of nature, the elements, etc., or robust figures. As these gods or idols are enumerated farther on and exhaustively treated in my commentary of the Biblioteca Nacional manuscript, now in press, it suffices for my present purpose merely to mention here that the most mysterious figure of Mexican cosmogony is Tezcatlipoca. That's not the correct way to say it. I'm just saying it for, for our purpose, right? Tezcatlipoca, that's the English way to pronounce it, whose symbolic name literally means shiny mirror, proved to be identical with Mictlantecuhtli, right, the lord of the underworld, whose title may also be interpreted as the ruler or regent of the north, since Mictlantecuhtli is the name of the cardinal point. Now pay attention when they're giving these so-called deities out. Pay attention to the directions they give you for them too. Like, so for instance, Tezcatlipoca and Mictlantecuhtli represents the north, right? And then we're gonna get into represents the south, and we're gonna get into all that. Everybody is given some quote unquote cardinal point, right? All right. Since McLampa is the name of this cardinal point, the Codex Fuenlil 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 Analysis de Moses Nacional Mexico Toma. All right, that was in parentheses. Preserves an important myth, realizing how Tezcatlipoca, after having been the sun, was cast down from the supreme position by Huitzilopochtli. Now, Tezcatlipoca represents the woman, right? We can get to that. And Huitzilopochtli represents the man. Tezcatlipoca or Michelan represents the below. Huitzilopochtli represents the above. And they was always, quote unquote, battling for that supreme position of the sun, quote unquote. But we're going to get to all this, right? Now, the Codex Fuenlil preserves an important myth relating how Tezcatlipoca, after having been the sun, was cast down from the supreme position by Huitzilopochtli, descended to the water, but had arisen again in the shape of an oscillate and transformed himself into the constellation of Ursa Major. Remember, I told you all of this goes back to astronomy. Now, let's go back to the oscillate, because the oscillate is very, very important. The ocelot and jaguar, more so the jaguar, but the ocelot as well because of the coat, right? The spots on his coat represented stars and a whole bunch. But on the ocelot, if y'all ever seen the emblem of America with the sister who looked like Queen Khalifa or who could be Queen Khalifa, right? And she has a cat wrapped around her shoulder to her waist side, right? That's the ocelot. Or it could very well be the ocelot. I'm saying that's the ocelot because the ocelot is indigenous to Mexico and the California region, right? And that picture or that emblem of America was put in California. The location was supposed to be California. You can tell that by the different trees and shrubberies and everything that's in the background, right? But let's continue. Where I was at. All right, the Codex Fuenlil preserves an important myth relating how Tezcatlipoca, after having been the sun, was cast down from the supreme position by Huitzilopochtli, descended to the water, but had arisen again in the shape of an ocelot and transformed himself into the constellation of Ursa Major. According to Sawagan, the native name of this star group was Silao Colodo. That's not how you really pronounce it. I'm just pronouncing it like that. Or star scorpion. So Silao Colodo stands for star scorpion. Reference to Nahuatl dictionaries revealed that this insect had doubtlessly been named Cololo on the account of its habit of recurving its tail when it raged. So Colodo means to recurve or to curve, right? The Nahuatl verb koloa means to bend over or twist something. The adjective kolotik is applied to something bent over or recurved. The noun kolotili, which is almost identical with kolodo, means the cross beams, the mounting branch or handle of a cross, right? Because what most don't know, the first images or depictions of a cross and an ankh was over here in the Americas, right? We're going to get to that later too. There's something else that's in this book. We're not going to cover that today, but we are going to cover that. The above fact shows that the idea underlying the name for Ursa Major is primarily that of something bent over or recurved. It is obvious that the form of the constellation answers to the description. It is moreover extremely significant to find in the Maya language also, because Nahuatl is not the Maya language. That's the ancient Aztec language, which came after the Mayans, right? And then the Aztec, they got some other shit going on later on. A lot of them ain't real deal original people later on, right? But yeah. So where I was at, it is obvious that the form of the constellations answer to this description. It is moreover extremely significant to find in the Maya language also a certain resemblance between the words for scorpion and for a cross, right? Because in the Nahuatl language, those kind of real close. You feel me? Damn near the same damn word. They just spelled it a little different. Which that's why I wish y'all could see the words. Um, and resemblance between the words for scorpion and for cross. This in Maya is Zen Chi, and that is for scorpion, and Zen An for cross. No, Zen Chi for cross, and that for scorpion is Zen An, and that is in the Maya language. That's spelled Zen Chi is spelled Zinche, like it sounds, and Zen An is spelled like it sounds too, Zinan, and that means scorpion in the Maya language. The above data justify the introduction that the native conception of a cross was connected with the ideas of its arms being bent over or recurved, as in the Mayan Mexican calendar swastika. Let me read that part over. I stumbled a little bit. The above data justify the induction that the native conception of a cross was connected with the idea of his arms being bent over or recurved, as in the Mexican calendar swastika. It is important to find the scorpion figured as one of the several symbols of Michelaantecutli, the Lord of the North, and his sculptured effigy preserved at the National Museum of Mexico. It is more significant that the verb coloa, spelled Coloa, besides meaning to bend over or twist something, also express the action of describing or performing a circle by walking around something. All right, so koloa, besides to bend over or twist something, also express the action of describing or performing a circle by walking around something. Now, this is precisely what Tezcatlipoca, the Ursa Major, is represented as doing on page 77 of the Being manuscript, since he figures there surrounded by a circle of footsteps. I could but note that this fact showed that the name of Colodo applied to the constellation and was not incompatible. I'm fucking up, my bad, y'all. I could but note that this fact showed that the name of Colodo applied to constellation was not incompatible with the identification of Tezcatlipoca. Once my attention had drawn to the action of walking performed by this guy, I naturally considered with this fresh interest the peculiar fact that he is usually represented with one foot, right? So Tezcatlipoca. Now let me go back to that. I'm gonna always be going back just because I know I'll be fucking up, y'all. I could but note that this fact showed that the name of Colodo, and that's spelled Clotl, which is not really pronounced that, applied to the constellation was not incompatible with the identification of Tezcatlipoca. Once my attention had been drawn to the action of walking performed by this god, I naturally considered with fresh interest the peculiar fact that he is usually represented with one foot only. The circumstances which he had been deprived of this member are set forth in several of the codices wherein I'm reading too fast, my bad, let me slow down. The circumstances under which we have been deprived of this member are set forth in several of the codices wherein we see that after he descended to the water, he had an encounter with an alligator who had viciously bitten off one of his foots and carried it away. Pictures representing Tezcatlipoca after this event displayed a broken end of the tibia exposed and the transverse section of the bone forming a ring, usually painted either white or red. So when you see Tezcatlipoca on the codices or anything, right, he's usually painted like he usually have one foot and then a hole or a hollow circle around the other one, showing that the foot was missing, was broken off by the alligator or bitten off by the alligator. All right, special pains seem to have been taken to accentuate the hollowness of the bone ring, since its center is usually painted blue, the symbolic color of air, and conventionalized puffs of breath or air are shown as an issuing from it. In some cases, as sculptured monolith. Oh, my bad, I'm reading fast again. In some cases, as on the sculptured monolith called the Stone of Tizah, these symbols of breath is issuing from the broken tibia are figured in such a way that modern writers, ignoring that what they were meant to represent, were led to identify them as some animal's tails attached to the foot of the deity. So when Spaniards first came over here, when they looked and seen Tezcatlipoca on the codices and everything, they thought that meant an animal or something was attached to his foot, when the circle, when the hollow circle and puffs of air actually represented him missing a foot. All right. With the god frequently figured as a ear ornament with his broken when his broken tibia is concealed. So you will always be able to tell who Tezcatlipoca is on these codices, because even if his foot is covered or concealed, the broken tibia is concealed, it have breaths of air, like little blue breaths, like a little curve. I wish I could show y'all right quick. But it'd be right by his ear, letting you know that's Tezcatlipoca and he has a foot missing, right? Besides certain fanciful interpretations which have been given to the symbol, it has been explained as being a hieroglyph conveying the name Tezcatlipoca and consisting of an obsidian mirror, the Tezcat, and smoke equals Pochitili. A possible objection of this assertion might be that in Mexican pictography, the mirror is invariably represented as jet black in a white or red frame. In the Codex Telerano reminisce a combination of symbols of water, fire, and a serpent are figured as issuing from the base of the bone. Having taken particular pains to collect all representations of this footless god, I was especially interested in one in which he figured as standing on a cross-shaped symbol, Olin. All right. Hold on. Olin is spelled Ollin. I could show y'all this if y'all want. Just typing in. Ain't nobody. There's only one person in here with me. All right. But if you want me to show you, I can just put it in the box. I'll show it to you. But Olin, the accepted meaning. Wait, let me go back to that because this last part of the sentence is important. I was especially interested in which he is figured as standing on the cross-shaped symbol Olin, the accepted meaning of which is 4 movements, right? So the Olin means 4 movements. The most remarkable and puzzling picture I found, however, is that in which jaws of Tezcatlipoca, the symbol of the north, are represented as holding one of Tezcatlipoca's ankles in a tight grip and practically fastening him thus to the center of a diagonal cross, right? So they're symbolizing that he's fastened to the center, right? And he can only go around with one foot, so like in a circle, so he can't go nowhere, right? But that is representing the Ursa Major, but we're gonna get to that. Tezcatlipoca, ankles in a tight grip and practically fasten him thus to the center of a diagonal cross. In this and other pictures, it is obvious that the artist had endeavored to convey the idea of a person permanently attached to one spot by one foot. The only form of locomotion possible to him would be to describe a circle by hobbling on one foot around the other, which would serve as an axis or a pivot, right? So his foot serves as the axis or a pivot, which would be 2 polaris. The association of this peculiarity with the symbols of the North impressed me deeply and involuntarily caused me to think of a title bestowed in the Codex of Fuenlau upon the supreme divinity, namely the wills of the winds. So in the Codex Fuenlau, it was a supreme divinity named the will of the winds, as well as an expression employed by Tezozomac, referring to the constellations revered by natives. He mentions the north and his will. All right, so all of this is going back to astronomy, constellations, which is all going to come back to agriculture and a lot more. Realizing that some definite and important meanings must underlie the remarkable representations of Tezcatlipoca, I resorted to all possible means to gain an understanding of them. Referring to Nuwat, dictionaries, I found a variety of synonymous names for a person who limped or was lamed or maimed. Amongst them was popozeteki, from pozeteki, the verb to break a leg. So pozeteki in Nuak means to break a leg. Other names was shopozoteki, which is spelled Opuzteqi, and Shotemol, which is spelled Xotemol, and Ikshipozoteki, right? Or it should, Ish. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's spelled Icxitl. Ikship, which equals foot, right? My bad, y'all. The latter, the latter name happened to be a familiar to me. The commentator of the Vatican Codex, Padre Rios, gives it as the name of a guy and translates it as the lame devil, right? So it should, my bad, y'all. So he was the name of the lame devil, right? So Michelin Tectili name literally meant lame devil, which coincides with him having one foot and hobbling around and everything, right? Because he's handicapped or maimed or lamed and all of that shit. Or you know what lame mean, right? Basically a person with one foot, a messed up foot, something like that. Right. Now, the later name happened to be familiar to me. The commentator of the Vatican Codex, Padre Rios, gives it as the name of a guy and translates it as the lame devil. Right. And also mentioned along with Tectili, it goes hand in hand because Michelin Tectili represents the below, right, which be considered the devil, but it's not. He records it immediately after Michelin Tecutili, the Lord of the North, and designates it as his name and one of the four principal and primitive gods of the Mexicans, right? So Michelin Tecutili is one of the four principal gods of the Mexicans, right? Then you got the commentator of Tolerano Ramesses Codex, moreover, records that these four gods were said to have been stars and had fallen from the heavens. At the present time, there are stars in the firmament named after them. I ain't gonna slide by that. I'm gonna read that one more time for you. That was a gem. You hear me? What he said the commentator of Tolerano Ramesses Codex, moreover, records that these four gods were said to have been stars and have fallen from the heavens. And at this present time, there are stars in the firmament. You caught that, right? The firmament named after them, right? Other than this book was written in, I believe 1897. This when it got published. It could have been written a couple years before that. But other synonymous terms for lame persons was Ikshen Kutalik. I'm fucking that up. I ain't gonna hold you that. I'll spell it out for you. You hear me? It's spelled Icxinnecutic. Ikshen Kulatik. I'm not gonna do it right now. I ain't gonna embarrass myself right now. I do it off screen and then I'll come back to you and shit to let you know what it is. And Sean Kulatik, right? And that's spelled Xonecuiiltic. And I'm telling you the names of these or the spellings of these because one is hard to pronounce. So y'all know I can read, bro. His name's just hard to pronounce. And two is because the way these are spelled actually coincides with stars or with different cultural traditions and different things that we're going to get into, right? So I'm spelling these out for a reason. Where was that? Other synonymous terms for lame persons will be Ikshen Kulatik and Shon Kulatik, Tizampoteki. On the other hand, besides meaning lame, also signified something crooked, bent, or incurvated, right? Incurvated. But I'm gonna spell Tizimpuzitiki for you because that's gonna come up again. Tzimpuztequi. The second name furnished me with an important clue for Saugun. Distinctly records that the native name of for the constellation Ursa Minor was Shonkukili. So Shonkukili. So if I'm not mistaken, Shonkulitik is for the Ursa Major, and Shonkukili is for Ursa Minor, and that's all dealing with astronomy. And that it was figured as an S. So it was also figured as an S. So if you see on certain codices an S out of nowhere, that's more than likely what it represents. Besides the Academy MS or Academia MS of his monumental work contains the native drawing of this star group reproduced as figure 16, number 1. He also, damn, shit, can I see show this shit, guys? Let me see. Oh, they ain't gonna let me, hold on, let me take off the green screen. I'll take it off, man. All right. Damn, I was trying to show y'all the actual drawing. I don't know how to take this off though. I'm gonna get it together next time for y'all. Shit, this is my first time, so bear with me. He records it immediately after. Oh no, we down some. All right. Tuzon Posatiki, on the other hand, besides meaning lame, also signifies something crooked, bent, or incurvated. The second name furnished me with an important clue for Saugon. Distinctly records the name for the constellation Ursa Minor, which was Shonkukili, and it was figured as an S. Besides the Academia MS of his monumental work contains the native drawing of the star group reproduced as figure 16, number 1. He also states that S-shaped loaves of bread named Shonkukili were made at certain festival in honor of this constellation. So they actually have festivals for this constellation, and its name, the Shonkukili, is the name of the cake or bread, right? And it's the name of the actual constellation as well, right? So that's why I was telling you, like the name, the spelling of these words comes into play too. Shonkukili were made at a certain festival in honor of this constellation, while the BNMS records that the peculiar recurved weapon figure in the hands of the deities were named Shonkutel. The above furnished me with the indisputable evidence of the existence in ancient Mexico of a species of star code connected with the circumpolar constellations and Tezcatlipoca, the Lord of the North, the central figure of the native cosmogony. It was puzzling to find this guy connected with not only the Ursa Major, but also the Ursa Minor. So actually, let me take that back. Even though I read this mad times, could always skip over things, right? Tezcatlipoca not only represented Ursa Major at times, also represented Ursa Minor. But that's going to go into when I told you Huitzilopochtli and Tezcatlipoca was always fighting for position of the sun, right? And it's a continual cycle, like it never stops, right? They always warn. That's the mythical battle, right? But we don't get to it. All right, so it was puzzling to find this guy was connected not only with Ursa Major, but also Ursa Minor, but an indication suggesting a possible explanation or reconciliation of these apparent inconsistencies is furnished by the descriptions of the strange ritual practice, which was annually repeated at the festival. I'm not pronouncing that. I'm gonna spell it for y'all though. I probably can't pronounce it, but I'm gonna spell it for you. TLACAXIPEHUALIZTLI. right? And was evidently the dramatization of the sacred myth, right? An illustration and a description of this rite are contained in BNMS, and the subject is fully treated in my commentary, and I shall but allude here to its salient figures. Is represented a Mortal Kombat. Okay, this the part, right? It represented a mortal combat between a oh no, this ain't it. But it is a represented it represented a mortal combat between a prisoner attached by a short piece of cord to the center of a large circular stone and five warriors who fought him singly. The fifth, who was masked as an oscillate and always obtained victory in an unequal contest, fought with his left hand, being left-handed, a peculiarity ascribed to Huitzilopochtli, right? Um, it was it was he who subsequently wore the skin of the flayed victim, an action which obviously symbolized a metamorphosis. One point is obvious that the drama exhibits a victor as a warrior who was able to circumscribe the stone freely and was masked as an oscillate, Tezcatlipoca, the Ursa Major, but was endowed at the same time with the left-handedness identified with Huitzilopochtli. You remember me when they come together because they really want Quetzalcoatl. That's not how you say his real name. I'm just say it for the purpose of this video, right? Of all my videos, but Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl um, actually are Huitzilopochtli and Tezcatlipoca as one. So when they come together, they create the divine twin serpent, right? Which is Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, right? And Kukulkan, we gonna get to Kukulkan and everything in the same book, right? We just starting out where we at. All right, where was that? And was masked as an oscillate, Tezcatlipoca, the Ursa Major, but was endowed at the same time with left-handedness identified with Huitzilopochtli. This mythical personage vanquishes and actually wears the skin of the man attached to the stone, becomes the embodiment and point of fact, and obtains the supremacy for which he fought so desperately. In the light shed by the Codex Funeral before cited, it was easy to see that the entire performance dramatized the mythical combat between Tezcatlipoca and Huitzilopochtli for the position of the ruling power in the heavens, the sun. Right? You remember earlier I told you it was always fighting for that position to be the sun. Right? You got the night sun, which is the moon, and you got the the light sun or the day sun, which is the sun, right? Tezcatlipoca, Huitzilopochtli, for the purpose of ruling in the heavens, the sun, all right? At the same time, it was decidedly puzzling to find celestial supremacy personified by a man firmly fastened to one spot, the center of a stone circle. It was impossible not to perceive the identity thought underlying the representation of this prisoner and the pictures of Tezcatlipoca, the one-footed or lame god, Shonkukili, the Ursa Minor. It was moreover an extreme interest to note that existence of traditional records preserved in native myths of changes in relative positions of celestial bodies and of Ursa Major in particular. I'm gonna read that part over. It is moreover extreme interest to note that the existence of traditional records preserved in the native myths of changes in the relative positions of celestial bodies and the Ursa Major in particular, right? Whilst dwelling upon the striking analogy existing between the representations of Tezcatlipoca held fast by the symbol of north and the prisoner attached to what described either as a tamalakade. I'm not gonna pronounce it. I'll spell it out for you. It's Temalacatl. Stone world, which means stone world or an image of a sun. My gaze fell on a small model of the calendar stone of Mexico hanging above my desk and rested on the symbol of Olin in the center. Right? Oh shit, what just happened? Olin in the center. The learned director of the National Museum of Mexico, Senor Transcoso, had expressed his view that his symbol was an actual figurative representation of an annual and apparent movements of the sun and recorded its position at the celestial and equinoctial periods. So I'm gonna read that part over because that's very important, right? When we understand this astronomy and these symbols and what the Olon represented and everything else. The learned director of the National Museum of Mexico, Senor Troncoso, had expressed his view that this symbol was an actual figurative representation of the annual apparent movements of the sun and recorded its positions at the celestial and equinoctial periods, right? I had moreover submitted a drawing of this same figure to the eminent English astronomer Professor Norman Lockyer, and he had corroborated this view and had established its correctness. On the other hand, I had long noted that the Olin was usually figured with an I, right? So, damn, I should be able to show this, bro. Can y'all see that shit? I don't know if you can see that shit. Damn, I'm gonna take this green screen off so y'all can actually see the images. All right, put it on that bit. Don't know how to take it back off. All right, but I had moreover submitted a drawing of the same figure to the eminent English astronomer Professor Norman Lockyer, and he had corroborated this view and established its correctness. On the other hand, I had noted that the Olin was a usually figured with an eye, the symbol for a star in its center, right? And had also paid particular attention to the fact that the Mexicans had conceived the ideas of two suns, the young day sun and the ancient night or black sun. Remember I told you earlier, they had two suns, right, that they believed. There was the young day sun, which is the sun that, feeds that gives us vitamin D and all that other good shit, right? And then you have the ancient black sun or night sun, which is the moon. And the BNMS and on the mantas worn at their respective festivals, the day sun is depicted in somewhat a fanciful manner in blue and red on a white field. The black sun is, however, represented in classical style, so to speak, as on the sculptured calendar stone with 4 larger and 4 smaller V-shaped rays issuing from it. So that's how y'all see it. So the black sun is, however, represented in classical style, so to speak, as a sculptured calendar stone with 4 larger and smaller V-shaped rays issuing from it, right? And then the day sun is going to be very fancy blue and yellow on a white field, right? That's how they depict it when they putting on the regalia trying to depict the sun. All right, what we got in this connection as well to recall here that the Mexicans had no specific name for the sun beyond Tonatiuh. So Tonatiuh, which merely means sheds light, could equally apply to the stars. So Tonatiuh would be the Nahuatl name for sun. Tonatiuh, and it also can be a name for a star, right? Which merely means which sheds light and could equally apply to the stars. In the picture writings of the image of the sun was employed to convey the word diot, or how do I say it in English? Teotili. I don't know how to pronounce it in English. Teot. That's how you pronounce it in Nahuatl, right? It just so the TL, when you see these Nahuatl words, whether it's on the end or the beginning, that is one sound. So it's like a Like when you hear them making the K sound, that's the Nawat. So it's not Nawaddle, like us English speakers say, right? It's Nawat. So, but I'm not gonna get into it. We can get into that another time. But the sun, let me get back to that part. The picture writings of the image of the sun was employed to convey the word Deodo. I'm gonna just say leave it like that, and it's spelled Teotl, right? But we find that this word is assumed to be equivalent to their dios. And you know, dios mean God, right? By the Spaniards, and was also a reverential title bestowed upon the chieftains and superiors, was consistently employed in composition of words to signify something divine, supremely, etc. Right? So, Diot means something, which would mean something divine, right? Something beautiful, something supremely, yeah, divine, right? For like a better words, and that's what they would call the chiefs, um, and the superiors of the different tribes. And where I'm at. Whilst I was pondering on the possibility that the symbol Olin might be represented, might have represented the movements of the luminaries of night as well as the orb of day, my attention became fixed upon four numerals in each of the ends of the symbol, and I was struck by a certain resemblance between the positions of those of the four stars which form the body of a certain bear in the constellation of Ursa Major, because Ursa Major, the nickname for or the other name for Ursa Major is the Big Bear, right? And the Big Dipper is actually inside that constellation as well, and we might talk about that in this part. Hold on, yeah. Oh, man, I had something white on my leg. I didn't know what the fuck that was, boy. Smoking. Drink some of that good water. All right. Where I was at? Where I was at? All right. Let's hop back to the top. So it said I was struck by a certain resemblance between the positions and those of the four stars which form the body of the bear in the constellation of Ursa Major. It was then that occurred to me, as mentioned in the opening sentence of this introduction, to look at the familiar constellations with a view to verifying the resemblance noted above. As my gaze sought the pointers in the Ursa Major and then mechanically turned to Polaris, I thought of some passages I had recently reread in Professor Lockyer's Dawn of Astronomy, realizing that his observations dealing with the latitude 26 degrees, taking Thebes as representing Egypt, could equally apply to Mexico, as in this country stretches from the latitude 15 degrees to 31 degrees, right? That's my fucking gem. I'm gonna read that part over right quick. As my gaze sought the pointers in Ursa Major and then mechanically turned to Polaris, I thought of some passages I had recently reread in Professor Lockyer's Dawn of Astronomy, realizing that his observations dealing with latitude 26 degrees, taking Thebes as representing Egypt, could equally apply to Mexico, as this country stretches from latitude 15 degrees to 31 degrees. The moment primitive man began to observe anything, he must have taken notes of the stars, and as soon as he began to talk about them, he must have started by defining in some way or another the particular star he meant. Observers would first consider the brightest stars and separate them from the dimmer ones. They would then discuss the stars which never set, which would be the circumpolar constellations, and separate them from those which did rise and set, right? So when our ancient ancestors first, that's what she's saying now. I'm just going on, we reading this book, and just because I'm reading stuff, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge in this book, and I support this book, but at the same time, I don't never agree with everything someone says. I have my own mind. I know things myself. I didn't just get my knowledge from this book. You feel me? So yeah, yeah. So you can believe it. Take it how you want it, right? But let's continue on. The observers, the first observers first would consider the brightest stars and separate them from the dimmer ones. Then they would discuss the stars which never set, which would be the circumpolar constellations, and separate them from those that did rise and set, right? Then they would naturally, in a northern climb, choose out the constellation of the Great Bear or Orion. And for small groups, the Pleiades, right? Y'all know about the seven sisters, the Pleiades, right? That's covering this too. And that's, actually the seven sisters is a American Indian, you know, um, name, right? They would naturally, in a northern climb, choose out the constellation of Great Bear or Orion, and for small groups, the Pleiades. A few years observation would have appeared to demonstrate the absolute changelessness of the places of the rising and setting of the same stars. It is true that this result would have been found to be erroneous when a long period of time had elapsed and when observation became more accurate, but for hundreds of years the stars would certainly appear to represent fixity, while the movements of the sun, moon, and planets were seen to be bound by no law, would appear erratic so long as the order of the movements was not known. So when you're studying the stars, they move mad slow. It's not really, I mean, they're gonna say Polaris is, you could say, Orion and all of that. You could say stars like that are set stars, but all of them move. They just move stupid slow. So you wouldn't be able as a astronomer, right, or a star reader, whatever our ancient ancestors called themselves, right, who studied the stars. They wouldn't be able to tell that the stars moved in their lifetime, right? Because they not gonna be able to see the shit because it takes so long for it to move. But what they would be able to tell if the people recorded it, the people that came before them recorded the movements, and they'd be able to, go off of that and build upon that, right? All right. Let's continue on. Then they would naturally, in the northern climb, choose out the constellation of the Great Bear or Orion. For small groups, the Pleiades. A few years observation would have appeared to discriminate, no, demonstrate, my bad, the absolute changelessness of the places of rising and setting of the same stars. It is true that this result would have been found to be erroneous when a long period of time had elapsed and when observation became more accurate, but for hundreds of years, the stars would certainly appear to represent fixity, while the movements of the sun, moon, and planets would seem to be bound by no law, would appear erratic so long as the order of their movements were not known. The reflection that Ursa Major was probably the first constellation which made any deep impression on the mind of prehistoric man in America, as elsewhere, lent an additional interest to the star group as I concentrated my mind upon its form and endeavored to imagine and for. Hold on, y'all. Fucking dog going crazy. Let me see what she's talking about. Stay away from that fucking door. My bad, y'all. All right, so where we was at? We was at bound by no law. All right, so the reflection of Ursa Major was probably the first constellation which made any deep impression upon the mind of prehistoric man, as elsewhere lent an additional interest to the star group as I concentrated my mind upon its form and endeavored to imagine it in four equidistant positions corresponding to the numerals in the symbol Olin of the calendar stone of Mexico. I succeeded in obtaining in succession mental images of the constellation in four opposite positions. This effort led to an unforeseen result which surprised me. In a flash of mental vision, I perceived a quadrupled image of the entire constellation standing out in scintillating brilliancy from the intense darkness of the wintry sky. So let me read that part over. In a flash of mental vision, I perceived a quadrupled image of the entire constellation standing out in a scintillating brilliancy from the intense darkness of the wintry sky. At the same moment, I had saw it bore the semblance of a symmetrical swastika of giant proportions. Right now, she about to get into how we first used the swastika. OCO sister, what's going on, big sis? How you doing? Oh, you changed your name. I'm gonna get up with you. I gotta ask you a question too, because I was trying to send somebody one of your lives that you was doing just to help them out with genealogy. But I'm gonna get up with you after the live, sis. But appreciate you for coming in and showing love for sure. All right, get back to this. So now she about to get into these swastikas, right? Now she about to tell you how the astronomy and how people first used the swastika and what it truly represented. It didn't represent none of this hateful, racist shit these, skinheads and all these other motherfuckers using, right? Nazis and shit like that. All right. Deeply impressed with the striking resemblance between the composite of Polaris Ursa Major had certain forms of the swastika. I had started on a fresh line of investigation and devoted myself to the study of primitive astronomy and its influence upon the intellectual development of mankind in general and the American races in particular. After having worked during 13 years without any preconceived ideas about the ancient Mexican civilization and without formulating any general conclusion concerning it, I saw all the knowledge I had slowly acquired fall into rank and file and organize itself into a simple and harmonious whole, right? Realizing this, I had perceived how, with the origin of the swastika, I had found the origin of the set of primeval ideas which had governed the human race from its infancy and which in Mexican and Central American civilizations ultimately developed into their ingenious system of government and social organization, right? So that line right there basically is telling you that our ancient ancestors used astronomy not only to write it down and know the stars and everything, right? Know how it looked. They actually use it to organize governments, social organizations. Not only that, we're gonna find out later they use it for astronomy and some more shit. But that's important right there, right? Let me read that little last sentence again. And in Mexican, hold on. Realizing this, I had perceived how, with the origin of the swastika, I had found the origin of the set of primeval ideas which had governed the human race from its infancy, which in Mexican and Central American civilizations ultimately developed into their ingenious system of government and social organization. And we're gonna get into that. All right, this next page is a whole bunch of swastikas that's showing the constellations. She wrote a little map out. I don't know how to work this green screen thing, so I can't even take it off and show you. All right, now we skim to page 18. The sequel to, because that was 2 pages of pictures. All right, the sequel to the above episode was that with the aid of my movable star chart, I had made the following notes of the apparent positions of the circumpolar constellations at the times of sunrise, midnight, and sunset, choosing the periods of the solstices and equinoxes in order to obtain an exact division of the year, because that's how we break up the year. solstices and equinoxes. They tell you when the seasons are coming. That's how our ancestors knew when to plant, when to harvest, when to plant, harvest, travel, migrate, go hunt, different place. Like it's different things that astronomy taught us. We're gonna get into it though, right? But it taught us time too, right? That's how we measured the time of the year was. Um, Solstices and equinoxes in order to obtain an exact division of the year. While studying these, I had realized that the midnight position was the only stable one, since the actual visibility of the constellations before dawn and after dusk would be subject to considerable variation according to the season, latitude, and atmospherical conditions. Having noted these positions, I had next combined them with separately obtaining the remarkable results given in Figure 4, which I can't show you right now. The combined midnight positions of the Ursa Major or Minor at the four divisions of the year, which yielded symmetrical swastikas, the forms of which were identical with the different types of swastika or cross symbols, the normal, the OG, and the volatile, etc. So I guess they got different types of swastikas, right? But it's basically saying that the stars form that naturally, right? Or that's what our people would have seen, and that's why they put it on Earth. That's why they made drawings. That's why they made it a calendar. That's why they did different things with the swastika. All right. The forms of the which were identical to different types of the swastika or cross symbols, which have come down to us from a remote antiquity and are reproduced here for comparison. Reflection showed me that much composite pictures of the Ursa constellations constituted an exact record of their annual rotation and afforded to a perfect sign for the period of a year. All right, that's what I just said. I moreover perceived that the association of rotary motion with the advance of time and its division into fixed periods of or cycles would have be the natural outcome of the recognition of the annual rotation of the star groups, right? I moreover perceive how the association of the rotary motion with the advance of time and its division into fixed periods or cycles would have been the natural outcome of the recognition of the annual rotation of the star groups. The calendar swastika or cross of ancient Mexico constitutes an absolute proof of the native association of the cross symbol with the ideas of rotary motion and the progress of time, and furnishes an indication that in an anomalous manner, the swastika may have been primarily and generally employed by primitive races as a sign for a year or cycle, right? Which makes sense because you got four seasons, the swastika breaks up in four parts, makes all the purposes in the world, right? A close scrutiny of the respective forms of the crosses yielded by Ursa Major and Minor shows that the normal swastika and the suave swastika may be explained as the separate representations of the two constellations, the angular break in the outline of Ursa Major suggesting the direction of the bend to the right and to the my bad, y'all, of the arms of the normal swastika. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna read that part over. Right. So now it's two swastikas, right? Two swastika symbols, right? It's the swastika, which is the SUAVA right? And then you got the regular spell swastika. Right. And you're gonna see how they go hand in hand, basically. All right, we see. All right, minor shows the normal swastika and swastika may be explained as separate representations of the two constellations. The angular break in the outline of Ursa Major suggesting the direction of the bend to the right of the arms of the normal swastika, whilst the form of Ursa Minor obviously suggested the bend to the left, which is a characteristic of the swastika, right? So one to the left, That's the swastika. One to the right, which is the normal way of showing it, is the swastika. And the swastika represents Ursa Major, and the swastika represents Ursa Minor, right? My growing conviction that the Bear constellations had furnished the architect of different forms of swastika and cross symbols found subsequent support when I referred to the map showing the geographical distribution of the ancient symbol published by Professor Thomas Wilson and his valuable comprehensive monograph on the subject, to which I am indebted to for much information and several illustrations. The map reproduced here proves that, with two exceptions, which can be attributed to a migration southward, the employment of the swastika has been confined to the northern hemisphere, i.e., precisely to that portion of our globe from which the circumpolar constellations are visible, right? So only where the constellations are visible are you going to see ancient symbols of swastikas, because, it's representing astronomy, right? Ursa Major. The interesting possibility of being able to determine approximately the date in the world's history when the swastika began to be employed as a symbol next occurred to me. Piazza Smith Star Group discussed and reproduced, and Professor Lockyer's work already cited illustrates the changes of directions of the Earth axis in space, which gives rise to what is called the precession of the equinoxes, and has a cycle of something like 25,000 or 26,000 years. So they're saying the precession of the equinoxes has a cycle of something like 25,000, 26,000 years. Reference to this map proved that the observation leading to the adoption of the swastika as a symbol could not possibly have been made until after Ursa Major had become circumpolar about 4,000 BC. So what that really just said was the swastika, we used it first, right? Even though you got different, I'm gonna say, civilizations. My bad, y'all. My sinus is fucking with me. I didn't even know I had them. But yeah, nah. So the swastika was over here first, right? And it wouldn't have been, nobody else would have been able to use it until 4,000 BC, because the constellation of Ursa Major, or the Big Bear, whatever you want to call it, was over here first, not nowhere else, over here in the Americas, right? So we had the oldest form of the swastika, and we had it so much that we're the only people that made an ancient calendar out of it, right? So that tells you something else. All right, let's continue on. At that period when Draconis was the pole star, because at one point Draconis was the pole star, the circle described it oh my bad. When Draconis was the pole star, the circle described about it by Ursa Major was considerably closer than it is at its present. The accompanying illustrations, subject to correction, demonstrate the relative distance of the constellation about 2,770 BC, in about 1800 BC, and about 2000 AD, and show how much more strikingly impressive the polar region of the heavens were in remote antiquity. So basically, they saying the stars was brighter back then, which we know to be true, right? Definitely nowadays with all this shit they put in the air. Let us now briefly review some of the ideas which naturally suggest themselves to the mind of the primitive observer. After he had recognized the apparent immovability of the polar star, concentrated his attention upon this feature and contrasted it with the varying motions of all other celestial bodies in general, and with the rotation of the circumpolar star groups in particular. The recognition would lead to his gradually learning to utilize Polaris as a means of ascertaining direction. So what she's talking about is ancient man, right? So she's saying ancient man would have used Polaris as a direction, which we know we still do today, right? The recognition will lead to gradually learning to utilize Polaris as a means of ascertaining direction. His appreciation of valuable guidance rendered in perilous wanderings will develop feelings of trust, dependence, and gratitude towards the one changeless star, which permanently rendered valuable services and under whose guidance difficult and essential nocturnal expeditions will have been safely undertaken. Right. So she's basically saying now she's guessing. She don't know what the fuck original man would have felt or whatever, but it makes sense, right? But I don't all just go off of their words alone, right? But she's basically saying that we would have been grateful for Polaris, right? Because it get us out a lot of shit, teach us where to hunt, when to crop, when to do a lot of things, right? Help us not get lost, most importantly, and not wander around aimlessly. So our people would have first drew a picture of that just to show some type of appreciation, something like that, right? Now, the recognition would lead to his appreciation of valuable guidance rendered in perilous wonders would develop feelings of trust, dependence, and gratitude towards the one changeless star, which permanently rendered valuable services and under whose guidance difficult and essential nocturnal expeditions could be safely undertaken. Excuse me. Superiority and eventually extensive supernatural power would more and more be attributed to it as knowledge was gained by the laws of motion from which it alone seemed to be exempt. Right? I'm gonna read that a little slow. Superiority and eventually extensive supernatural power would be more and more attributed to it as knowledge was gained of the laws of motion, which would alone seem to be exempt. This exemption will cause it to be viewed as superior to all other heavenly bodies and even the sun, right? Because, do a lot of shit for us, right? So that's what he's saying. Man would have conceptualized the star as, right? Which is Polaris. And above the sun, even the sun, right? And it is easy to see how this idea becoming predominant might have caused the cult. You hear cult? Go look up the definition. Don't just think it's something totally bad. Might cause the cult of the pole star to de-establish an organized sun cult amongst his tribe. Historical evidence to which I shall revert more fully proves indeed that a American Indian ruler and a reformer actually employed the following reason in order to convert his council and his people from the worship of the sun to that of a supreme divinity, which could have been no other but Polaris. It is not possible that the sun should be the God who created all things, for if so, he would sometimes rest and light up the whole world from one spot. Thus, it cannot be otherwise but that there is someone who directs him and is truly the true creator, right? So they saying the sun ain't the true creator because he would have rested. They say, take a day off, Sabbath, all that good shit, right? So they basically saying the sun couldn't have been a supreme creator, it's somebody over him, and that would be the pole star or Polaris. And they only saying, well, they would say Polaris for a lot of reasons, but Polaris, you can't see Polaris in the daytime, so Polaris takes a break, right? All right, let's continue. These words shed a whole flood of light upon the primitive religious ideas at an early stage of development. They prove that the association of repose and immovability, which the supreme power signified a radical change of thought based upon prolonged astronomical observation and indicated intellectual advancement. Attempts to render the new idea objective to express it and impress it upon the multitude would naturally end in the production of images of the supernatural power representing or typifying immovability, changelessness, strength, combined with the absolute repose, right? All the qualities they gave to Polaris. It is thus rendered evident what a deep significance may be embodied in the rudest images of supernatural beings and attitudes of repose, since a prolonged course of astronomical observation and reasoning might have preceded their production. Right? Simultaneously, with the recognition of Polaris as an immutable center of axle, axle energy, the the rotary movement of Ursa Major must have excited interest and observation. In this inevitable, my bad, fucking on the word, inevitable, stargazers should gradually recognize a constant agreement between certain positions of Ursa Major and Cassiopeia, right, which is another constellation. After dusk, for instance, and the annual recurrence of rain, verdure, and bountiful food supplies, right? Cassiopeia played a part too, right? And y'all can look up all of these constellations I'm naming. I appreciate it, sis. Um, yeah, y'all can look up all these constellations I'm naming right here. So y'all can get a better, you know what I mean? Y'all can see it in your brain what I'm talking about, because I want to just show y'all what I'm looking at. All right, where we going? All right, Ursa Major and Cassiopeia, for instance, and the annual recurrence of, let me read this part over, all right, because that was important. Simultaneously with the recognition of Polaris as an immutable center of axial energy, the rotary movement of Ursa Major must have excited interest and observation. It was inevitable that the stargazers should gradually recognize a constant agreement between certain positions of Ursa Major and Cassiopeia after dusk, for instance, in the annual reoccurrence of rain, verdure, and bountiful food supplies, right? The members of a tribe who were more observant now. Now, this is how they got power. Because knowledge, you know that saying, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is fucking power, and our ancestors practiced that, right? Now, pay attention to this part right here, right? So it said the members of a tribe who were more observant than others had, oh shit, change the page, my bad, let me go back. The members of a tribe who were more observant than others had learned to associate certain positions of these constellations with the seasons, and as a consequence were able to decide when expeditions to distant localities in quest of game or fruit might be successfully undertaken, would naturally assume leadership and command obedience and respect. So the wisest, the smartest, the most intelligent people back then were the fucking rulers. Definitely the ones that knew about astronomy, that knew how to make everything happen, right? That's who had power. So when wisdom is power, right? I mean, that goes with the woman, but we get into that later too. The sense of responsibility, superiority, and possibly rivalry will act upon such individuals as powerful incentive to further observation and thought, it as evident that their mental faculties expanded and one generation transmitted its store of accumulated. I'm gonna read this part over because I just fucked that part over, but I want y'all to listen to this part, right? Agriculture came, exactly, so it's big facts. Agriculture came from astronomy, and we're gonna get into that. I don't know if we're gonna get into it today though. We might. But this part right here is mad important. The sense of responsibility, superiority, and possibly rivalry will act upon such individuals as a powerful incentive to further observation and thought, to certain observation and thought, and it is evident as their mental faculties expanded and one generation transmitted its store of accumulated knowledge to the next. A regular cast of astronomer leaders would develop with a tendency to conceal secrets of their power from the ignorant majority. Gatekeeping is necessary. You know, but I would say, yo, give everybody the knowledge, but Everybody ain't gonna want the knowledge. They don't give a fuck. They don't care. They don't give a fuck about no damn knowledge. You feel me? They lost for the cause. They lost in the sauce. You feel me? But I'm gonna read this part again because that shit is a gem. You hear me? The sense of responsibility and superiority and possibly rivalry will act upon such individuals as a powerful incentive to further observation and thought. And it is evident that as their mental faculties expanded and one generation transmitted its store of accumulated knowledge to the next, a regular cast of astronomer leaders would develop with a tendency to conceal the secrets of their power from the ignorant majority. Of their power from the ignorant majority. And all they power is knowledge. That's it. It ain't about who can dunk the best, who can do you something. It ain't about none of it. It's about this, man. Yeah. Let's continue. A broken line carved on a rock by one of these primitive observers will have constituted a valuable secret note of the position of Ursa Major on a memorable occasion and will be looked upon as a mystic or magical sign by the uninitiated. So if you ain't initiated, right? I was just thinking of something. I forgot. It's gonna come back in my head, but I was just thinking of something, right? Oh, esoteric, right? Teachings. This is what that would be considered, right? Exo, not for the inside, not exo, not for the public, but for a select few of people, right? For the initiated, and that's all the initiated is people who took the time to do their fucking research to learn this, right? Because you ain't me telling you this right now. You don't know nothing about astronomy, ancient Americans, or anything of that. You're not even going to be able to digest this properly, right? So you're going to have to do further research, then come back to this. But yeah, it get like that. It get like that. Yeah. But let's continue. A series of such inscriptions might a series of such inscriptions might represent the store of astronomical knowledge accumulated by several generations of observers, and it is interesting to recognize that such astronomical records as these were probably the first which men were impelled to perpetrate in a lasting form, since it was absolutely necessary that they should be permanently available for reference at prolonged intervals of time. That's what we were talking about when I was talking about with them studying the stars and fixicity and all of that, because you're not going to be able to tell if a star moves in one lifetime, right? You have to study what your ancestors, what those who came before you left for you, right? And then you build on that, right? That's how it goes. All right, prolonged interviews of time. What is more, the mere fact of being obliged to refer to these inscriptions will cause astronomers to reside permanently in one locality. The habit of consulting the prophet or oracle before undertaking important steps involving the welfare of the tribe would gradually cause the rocks or cavern in which I don't know what the fuck she talking about rocks and caverns. We lived in castles and temples and fucking big ass shit. Tripping. If I say I don't agree with everything everybody say. The habit of consulting the prophet or oracle before undertaking important steps involving the welfare of the tribe would gradually cause the rocks or cavern in which he resided to be invested with a certain sacredness. That's what she said. In a certain sacredness. It is thus evident that the first man who rudely scratched the outline of the Ursa Major or Minor on a rock took what was probably one of the most monumentous steps in the history of human race, and it is easy to see how a variety of combinations of circumstances will have led many men in widely separated localities at different periods of the world's history to perform precisely the same action. In some cases, under favorable surroundings, the rudimentary attempt would mark the starting point for a long line of patient observation and study, which would inevitably lead to the creation of centers of intellectual growth to the association of the different positions of the constellation with the seasons and culminate in the habitual employment of a swastika as a sign for a year or cycle. What the fuck that word said? Culminate. I said it right. All right. Culminate. All right. Nate. Oh, culminate. All right. All right. So that's that. So now we know the swastika would have represented, for the most part, a year or a cycle, right? Is one Khatun, right? A Khatun in Mayan is a year, right? Oh, yeah. I'm pretty sure I got that right. I just studied this shit the other day, so I just made content on it. I better have it right. Um, the idea of rotation associated with calendar signs and periods finds its most striking and convincing amplification in the following description of the ancient Mexican game. Right, so this game that I'm about to read out, I'm gonna try not to stop on this one. It's just going to show. It's going to be basically astronomy, right? Um, the performance which furnished a division, or I, my bad. The performance which furnished a diversion to the Spaniards after conquest had evidently been originally connected to the religious ideas. The Indians selected a tall, stout, and straight tree, and looping off its branches, planted it firmly in the center of the great square. Right? Pay attention. Which was always situated in the center of the city and had four roads leading to it from the four quarters. Right? Remember, I told you our people are so cold. We created our civilizations, our city states, our towns, and everything from astronomy, from studying astronomy. All right. All right. Where was that? From the lead for four quarters leading to it. On the summit, they placed a large cylinder of wood, the shape of which compared by the Spaniards to that of a motor or a motar, whatever. Four strong ropes hung from this and supported a square frame composed of four wooden beams. Four other ropes were fastened by one end into the pole itself and wound around it 13 times. You remember 13, how many years, how many months in a year, or supposed to be in a year, right? 13. All these numbers make sense. It's gonna make a lot of sense once it resonate with you or digest. The loose ends were passed around through holes in the middle of each beam and hung from these. Four Indians masked as eagles or other birds ascended to the pole singly. By means of certain loops of cord and mounting on the cylinder, they perform in this perilous position a few dance-like moves. Each man then attached himself to the loose end of one of the hanging ropes, and then with a violent jerk, at the same moment, the four men cast themselves into space, which is the air, from their positions on the beams. The simultaneous movement caused the frame and the cylinder to revolve and uncoil the ropes to which the men were fastened, and these descended to the ground after performing a series of widening circles in the air. Meanwhile, the fifth individual who had mounted the wooden cylinder after the others stood on this, and as it revolved, beating a small drum with one hand whilst he held a banner aloft in the other. Whilst it is obvious that this peculiar and dangerous performance clearly specialized or symbolized actual rotation, typified by the revolving pivot and the four men in aerial motion, its full meaning and intention are only made clear by the following explanation recorded by Clavigero. 13 cycle. That's right, sir. Um, respect. Clavigero. The central point in this game was to calculate so exactly the height of the pole and the length of the ropes that the men should describe precisely 13 circles each before reaching the ground, so as it to represent the cycle of 4 times 13, which equals 52 years, right? And I believe that 52 years, I forgot what that's called. But yeah, 52 years, that's important though, because we won't come back to that. This passage constitutes absolute proof that the Mexican calendar system was intimately associated with axial rotation, and ideas such as could only have been derived from observation of Polaris and of the circumpolar constellations, right? So everything we do, our ancient people did, right? It was off of and hey, can I make you a mod, sis? Make you a mod? Yeah, as a moderator. Man, no, I need you to be the big moderator. All right, boom. All right, you do your thing. The passage constitutes absolute proof that the Mexican calendar system was intimately associated with axial rotation, and the ideas such as could only been derived from observation of Polaris and the circumpolar constellations. The game itself was a beautiful and well-conceived illustration of the flight of time, typified by aerial circles performed by men massed as birds, and of its methodical division into fixed periods, right? All of this shit going back to astronomy, everything. Leaving the subject of the calendar for the present, we must revert to my table recording the apparent annual and nocturnal axial rotation of the circumpolar constellations. While studying these, the reflection naturally arose that these people who observed Ursa Major must have paid equal attention to Cassiopeia, right? I told you Cassiopeia gonna come in play too, and notice that these constellations ever occupy opposite positions to each other as they circled around the pole, right? Remember Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, you got Cassiopeia. Well, Minor and Major is kind of like the same type shit, okay? But Cassiopeia and Ursa Major was always opposites of each other. So no matter if you see Ursa Major over here, Cassiopeia gonna be over there at all times. Ursa Major must have paid equal attention to Cassiopeia and noted that these constellations ever occupy opposite positions to each other as they circled around the pole, dwelling on the fact that in ancient Mexico, Ursa Major was associated with an ocelot. I remember the many representations which an ocelot is represented as confronting an eagle, usually in mortal combat. Mexican war chiefs were classed into two equally honorable grades, right? Designated as the ocelots and the Coatili, or the i.e. eagles, right? So you got the ocelots and the eagles. The constellation of Cassiopeia presents to me a marked resemblance to the image of a bird with outspread wings whose head turned toward Polaris, right? And Huitzilopochtli, Chitili, Tezcatlipoca, anytime you see two opposite forces fighting in ancient American history knowledge, definitely over here in the Yucatan and Mexico and shit like that, it's going to be representing that, right? For the most part, the above and the below. The fact that when this star group seems to be above, Ursa Major seems to be below, and vice versa, will obviously suggest that the idea of an eternal combat between two adversaries who alternately succumbed and resurrected, right? So one getting whooped, the other one winning, and then that one gonna resurrect and whoop that one, and it's gonna keep going forever and ever and ever. That's basically what they're saying. It was interesting on reasoning further to note that once the above idea had taken root, it must have been impossible not to associate in course of time, the quadrupled, and the bird with the elements to which they seem to pertain. My bad. I don't know what time is it. My bad, y'all. I'm not going nowhere. Don't go nowhere. I'm coming right back. We gonna cover that sentence again. Let me go wake up my lady up. She. Hey. My bad. I'm on live right now, so I ain't get wake up. I'm back. All right, so where was that? The constellations. All right, with Cassiopeia. All right. So I remember many representations which an ocelot is represented as confronting an eagle, usually in Mortal Kombat. Mexican war chiefs were classed into two equally honorable grades designated as the ocelots and the eagles. The constellation of Cassiopeia presents to me a marked resemblance to the image of a bird with outspread wings whose head is turned towards Polaris. The fact that when this star group seems to be above, Ursa Major seems to be below, and vice versa, which would obviously suggest that the idea of an eternal combat between the two adversaries who alternately succumbed and resuscitated. My bad. It was interesting on reasoning farther to note that once the above had taken root, it must have been impossible not to associate it in course of time, the quadrupled and the bird with the elements to which they seem to pertain, and gradually conceived the idea of everlasting antagonism between the powers of the sky and of the earth, or lightness and darkness, and other opposites which suggested themselves naturally or artificially created by the fertile mind of man. All right, above and below, like I said, represents masculine and feminine, and come together, that's divinity. Right, you need both. You can't have one without the other. I don't get all that feminine shit, all that extra, whatever they call that shit. I ain't with none of it. It's balanced. We need each other. All right. Like a dark sky, like a dark boom, boom, boom. All right. And this connection, it should be observed that the mythical adversary of Tezcatlipoca, the ocelot, designated as Ursa Major, is Huitzilopochtli, whose idol in the Great Temple of Mexico represented him as a hummingbird. The special, which he could represent an eagle too, but a hummingbird is very important in the ancient times as well. The special reason why this bird became associated with the god is explained by the following passage in Gomorrah. Ain't Gomorrah, but it's shit. Damn near. This bird died, or rather fell asleep in the month of October and remained attached by itself to a twig. It awakened again in April when the flowers blossom. For this reason, in the language of the country, it is named Huitzilopochtli, the resuscitated. All right. Oh, all right, that makes sense. All right, boom. So Huitzilopochtli actually got his name from the hummingbird. Excuse me, which is what is really what HU is really what in Noak, but I'm gonna just say it the English way. Zilin, or was it Zilin? Were resurrected. We therefore to see that whilst it was stated that the myth of the ocelot arose again after having been cast down from the sky by Huitzilopochtli, the very name of the latter betokened the bird god who was also just resuscitated from a presumably similar defeat. So, like I said earlier, one get whooped, the other one win, and it should just keep going over. It's a continual cycle, right? It's like the sun and the moon, right? Boom, resuscitated from a presumably similar defeat. As one and the same object may suggest several resemblances as the same time or consecutively thus give rise to a group of associations around a single figure. I venture to point out the zigzag form of Cassiopeia may well have been compared to a fork lightning and caused the idea of a lightning and thunder to become insuitably connected with the conception of a great celestial bird. Okay, so basically what they're saying right there is Cassiopeia has a zigzag form, which represents her, and Cassiopeia is also represented as a eagle with his or with a bird, with a great bird with his wings being spread wide. Also, that's the name of a Mako too, but we're not gonna get there right now, right? Mako and Quetzalcoatl, we gonna touch that another time, all right? But inseparably connected with a great celestial bird. But so I guess Cassiopeia is dictated or symbolized as a lightning and a great bird, right? Um, Again, there is the possibility that the same star group may have more strikingly suggested to the other people the idea of the winding body of a serpent, describing a perpetual circle around the central star. Right. So I wish I can show you this figure right here. I got it right here on my screen, in this little book and shit. But it's basically a circle going from end to end, right? And in each parts of where it's supposed to be a season in a year, it's a little loop. So north, south, east, west is a loop in each direction, right? And the snake is going all the way around. Um, but the serpent was, very powerful. Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, the divine feathered serpent, right? Um, Boom, boom, boom. Let's go down here. Again, the possibility that the same star group may have more strikingly suggested to other people that the idea of the winding body of a serpent, describing a perpetual circle around a central star in Mexico, as elsewhere we find the serpent closely associated with the idea of time, is represented as encircling the calendar wheel published by Clavigero. Four loops form of his body mark the four divisions of the year. Twin serpents whose head and tails almost meet are sculptured around the famous calendar stone of Mexico, right? Four, and that would be the calendar, the swastika calendar stone or swastika calendar, right? Four serpents whose bent bodies form a large swastika and whose head are directed towards a central figure are represented in the Codex Borgia in association with calendar signs. I should have occasion to refer in detail to the Mexican serpent symbolism further on. Meanwhile, I submit the interesting results obtained on combining the positions apparently assumed by the circumpolar constellations during a single night. The table exhibit four composite groups of representing the positions of the celestial and equinoctial periods. Right, let me read that part over because it's fire. Meanwhile, I submit that the interesting results obtained on combining the positions apparently assumed by the circumpolar constellations during a single night. The table exhibit four composite groups representing the positions of the celestial and equinoctial periods. The night of the winter solstice, the longest of the year, yielded along a symmetrical figure. The symmetrical kicking my ass, ain't it? It is resembled the well-known Troskleon, the companion symbol of the swastika. Now we ain't never do no Troskleon. That's some European shit. Just as this had proved to be the most natural year of symbols, so the Troskleon revealed itself as a natural sign of the winter solstice. And she just using this Troskleon thing, which is, I'll show you. If y'all really want to see a picture, I'll try to show it to you. But it's basically a spear with symbols in it and shit. but that's what they did over there, and she's just using they swastikas to compare to ours right now. All right, the night of the winter solstice is the winter solstice, the longest of the year, yielded alone in a symmetrical figure. It is represented. It re, it repres. I don't say represented. It resembled. My bad. It resembled the well-known trichlion, the companion symbol of the swastika, just as this had proved to be the most natural year of symbols, so the trichlion revealed itself as a natural sign of the winter solstice, the period recognized and celebrated by most inhabitants of the northern hemisphere as the turning of the year, which we ain't do that. All right. In a climate like that of Mexico and Central America, however, where the year divided itself naturally into a dry and rainy season, it is evident that the winter solstice will be less observed and that the ardently desired recurrence of the rainy season after a long trying period of drought should be regarded as the annual event of utmost importance. Right? So they're saying spring, our ancient ancestors practiced spring as the beginning of the year, not winter like these Euros, right? Paleface. Did it is evident that, or they said northern hemisphere, so we don't necessarily. Let me not just say pale faces because we got melanated folk. You feel me? In northern hemisphere and other parts of the world that might have did the same thing. So let me not just put it on them like that. I mean, that type. Um, it's evident to the winter solstice that would be less observed and ardently desired, and recurrence of the rainy season after a long and trying period of drought should be regarded as the annual of the utmost importance. Indeed, if carefully looked into, the entire religious code of these people seems to express but one great struggling cry to the God of nature for life-giving rain and a hymn of thanksgiving for the annual pressure. What just happened? I don't know if my live cut off. It just said something you live. I don't know what that was. That's crazy. Let me look at my battery. All right, boom. Yeah, I only got like four more pages, y'all. Indeed, it carefully looked into the religious code of these people seem to express but one struggling cry to the God of nature for life-giving rain and a hymn of thanksgiving for the annual precious but uncertain gift of water. To these supplicants, the winter solstice betoken little or nothing, and it is surprising to find no proofs of the employment of the triskelion as a sacred symbol in ancient Mexico, because they ain't our shit, right? On the other hand, it has been traced by Mr. Willenby on pottery from Arkansas and in Scandinavia. I got answers from Arkansas. I don't know about all of that. Yeah, I don't know about all of that. Scandinavia, I can see Scandinavia. Yeah, Arkansas, maybe. I don't know, okay. But where the circumpolar constellation, or that could have been left by the motherfucking Vikings. It can't. Possibility. Scandinavia, kind of close and all that. Yeah. Where the circumpolar constellations have been doubtlessly been observed from remote times, and the winter solstice has been held as the herald of coming spring. The triskelion is often associated with the swastika. I'm indebted to Professor Thomas Wilson's work already cited for the two following illustrations of objects exhibiting this association. The first is a spearhead found in Brandenburg, Germany. We don't give a fuck about that. The second is a bronze brooch from Scandinavia, to which I presently revert. It exhibits, besides the triskelion, swastika, and a circle, the S-shaped figure, which was, as I shall show further on, the sign actually employed by the ancient Mexicans and Mayans as the image of the constellation Ursa Minor, whose outline is indeed effectually reproduces. It indeed effectually reproduces, right? So I can't show you what's on the screen because they showing the little triskelion things they got up here, but this is saying that the S, so when you see the S on certain murals or in codices and different things of that nature, and it's like by itself, or you know what it represents. It represents Ursa Minor, not major, but minor. All right. Now let's continue. Oh shit! What just happened? Change the page. All right. But referring to the Mexican and Mayan representations of the star group, I would next demonstrate that the sacred numbers of Mexico and of other countries situated in the northern hemisphere coincide exactly with the number of stars in the circumpolar constellations themselves and in simple combinations of the same. Let me read that part again. Before referring to the Mexican and Mayan representations of this star group, I will next demonstrate the sacred numbers of Mexico and of countries situated in the northern hemisphere coincide exactly with the number of stars in the circumpolar constellations themselves and in simple combinations of the same. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor each contain seven stars. All right. And the number 7 is most widely spread as a sacred number. Ancient traditions record that the race inhabiting Mexico consisted of 7 tribes who traced themselves to 7 origins to 7 cages situated in the north. In memory of these, in the time of conquest, there were 7 places of sacrifice in the city of Mexico. I shall recur to the number 7 further on in discussing the native social organization and now direct attention to the 5 stars of Cassiopeia and to the fact that the combination of the stars in this constellation with Polaris and Ursa Major yields the number 13. Right? So that's a big one. Hold on, y'all. My bad. Yeah, where I was at. All right. So Ursa Major and Ursa Minor each contain 7 stars, and the number 7 is the most widely spread sacred number. Ancient traditions record that the race inhabiting Mexico consisted of 7 tribes who traced their separate origins to seven caves situated in the north. I'm gonna leave that there. In the memory of these, in the time of conquest, there were 7 places of sacrifice in the city of Mexico. I shall recur to the number 7 further on in discussing the native social organization and now direct attention to the 5 stars of Cassiopeia and to the fact that the combination of the stars in this constellation with Polaris and Ursa Major yields the number 13, right? Number 13 is a very important number, just like 7 and 4. This result especially interesting since the entire calendar system of Mexico and Yucatan is based on the combination of the numerals 13 plus 7 equals 20, and the latter again being 4 times 5. On the other hand, the same number 13 is also obtained by the combination of the Ursa star groups with Polaris. The number 5 is constantly yielded by Cassiopeia, and the fourfold repetitions of the groups supply the suggestion of the number 4. The combination of Ursa Minor and Cassiopeia yields 12. The accompanying figure exhibits swastikas composed of Ursa Minor accompanied by Ursa Major and Cassiopeia separated and combined. I next direct attention to the peculiar difference in the numerical values of the Ursa swastikas. In the first central star surrounded by 4 repetitions and the 7-star constellation yielded a total of 29 stars, 4 times 5 plus 9. Further combinations will be seen by a glance at the Ursa Major swastika. The analysis of this Ursa Minor swastika is not so simple and occasions a certain perplexity, right? When I had first combined the four positions of this constellation, I had naturally, without the further thought, figured Polaris but once as the figure fixed center, whereas I had repeated the stars of the compact group four times. Now I'm gonna read that sentence over again just because it's about to go into what I'm about to say, right? Or what I'm about to read. When I had first combined the four positions of this constellation, I had naturally and without further thought figured Polaris, but once as the figure center, whereas I had repeated the other stars of the compact four times. It was not until I had to count the stars in the swastika that I had realized how I had unconsciously made one central star stand for four, and thus deprived the composite group of the numerical value of three stars. On the other hand, if I repeated the entire constellation four times, I had attained the swastika with four repetitions of Polaris in the middle. In this way, however, Polaris became displaced, and the idea of a fixed center was entirely lost. A third possible method of composing the swastika was to allow one central star for each cross arm, but this gave two central stars, each of which would represent two stars, unless enclosed in a circle and considered as a central group by themselves. The four and the two repetitions of Polaris could not convey the idea of a pivot or fixed center. The three respective numerical values obtained from the experimental combinations were 4 times 6 plus 1, which equals 25. You got 4 times 7, which equals 28. Finally, you got 2 times 13, or 4 times 6 plus 2, which equals 26. And each swastika, the central star forcibly stood for and represented 2 or 4 stars. In the triskelion, the same perplexity arose. If Polaris was repeated, the idea of a fixed center was lost. If figured singularly, it nevertheless necessarily and inevitably stood as the embodiment of three stars. Reasoning from my own experience, I could not perceive in the foregoing facts a fruitful and constant source of mental suggestions that the natural outcome of which would be the association of the star group with an embraced numerical value and a familiarity with the idea of one star being the embodiment of two or three or four, right? Hope y'all follow that along. Ain't too much. Basically, Polaris, depending on how you're looking at it, represents 2, 3, or 4 stars, right? As the evolution of religious thought and the symbolism progressed, this idea will obviously lead to the conception of a single being uniting several natures in his person, right? So we go back to the beginning, you're gonna see how that goes into that, right? In this connection, it is certainly extremely interesting to find that the serpent associated with the calendar in Mexico and Yucatan and its nuac name being synonymous for twin, i.e. two, and the Maya for serpent, can or kam being synonymous for the number 4. So that's fire. You see how they did that there? I'm gonna read this part again. In this connection, it is certainly extremely interesting to find the serpent associated with the calendar in Mexico and Yucatan and its nuac name being synonymous for twin, i.e. two, and the Maya, right? The nuac is the ancient Mexicans, and the Maya for serpent is can or cam, being synonymous for the number 4. The serpent was therefore in both countries the most suggestive and appropriate symbol which could possibly have been employed in pictography to convey the idea of dual or quadruple natures embodied in a single figure. Right? Everything connects. Added to this circumstance that the native mind, the serpent would merely shedding its skin live again, and we can understand why the ancient Mexicans not only employed it as a symbol of eternal renewal or continuation of time and of life, but also combine it with the idea of physicity and reproductiveness. All right. I'm gonna read that part over again because this is where I said I was gonna stop him at page 32. Now, and I'm gonna cut this up and let y'all be able to watch it again. Hopefully, it ain't too bad. The next one do a little bit better, right? With reading and learning how to work this whole thing. But yeah, I'm gonna read that part again. But I want to read y'all the fine print of the page that I just passed. That I just was reading from, because that be having y'all got to read the small print because that got a lot of jewels in it. Now, besides the word colodo equals twin, the Mexicans had another term to express some double in pairs. A plant with two shoots named xolotl, double agave, or maize, when occasionally met with, were regarded with superstition and named michelotl. So basically, if you get a double eared corn, or I mean a double headed corn, or what they say right here, really anything, plants or anything, they say it as a superstition, and it's called michelotl, which means twin, or colodo means twin. That ain't how you pronounce it in Nuash, but colodo, Coatl equals twin in Nuash, right? The pretty little paraquets, popularly known as the lovebirds, from their habit of constant association in pairs, were named Xolotl. The circumstance that the term for the bird's down was Xolotl may be explained why the down feathers of eagles and other birds were employed and played a certain role in ritual observances. They, they expressed and conveyed the sound of a word which meant something double and could therefore be used to symbolize variety. And that's not even the one I read before, but we can still go. Which meant something double and could therefore be symbolized as variety meanings relating to multiplication and propagation. The propagation. All right. Um, the Mexicans figuratively connected birds down with generation. With generation is proven by well-known myth of the bird of Huitzilopochtli, the union of a ball of birds down and a goddess named she with the petticoat of serpents. Oh, so that is. Hold on. What that said just now? The Mexicans figuratively connected birds down with generation is proved by well-known myth of the birth of Huitzilopochtli from the union of a ball of birds down and a goddess named she with the petticoat of serpents. Tufts of birds down figure in the BNMS on the shield of the female actress. She didn't spell actress right. Of the human race. One of the numerous titles was Tosi. Tosi. Tosi means our grandmother, to express which figure of Sitili or hair was sometimes employed in a pictography. So a hair was also employed as Huitzilopochtli, I guess. Of her, it was said that she was born only twin. Oh no, of the lady with the petticoat of the serpent. That's what they talking about. Of her, it was said that she bore only twins, a figure of speech meaning great reproductiveness, just as a female divinity, also termed the woman with 400 breasts. That's crazy. Can you imagine that? And in the in the text to Terrano Reminisce Codex, we find Xolotl a deity. So her name is Xolotl, actually. So that's what I was talking about, Xolotl, and she's also symbolized as a hare or a or lovebirds, right? In the text to Tellerano Reminisce Codex, we find that Xolotl, a deity, wearing the shell symbol of Quetzalcoatl, directly named the god of twins, right? And you remember Quetzalcoatl is actually two in one, right? It's the masculine and the feminine. It's the mother and the father of all. It's not one or the other, right? So it's not one being, it's not it. Basically, Quetzalcoatl Kukulkan is the divine feathered serpent, which encompasses both the male and the female spirit as one. But in human form or term, it will be the man and the woman come together as one, right? The masculine and the feminine. All right. All right. All right. And then I said I was gonna read this one part over for you again, right? Then we're gonna close it out. I'm gonna try to doctor this up a little bit and make it a little bit more digestible. And then hopefully in what's today, Sunday, Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll put it in the actual on YouTube so y'all can actually plan it out, pre-schedule it or whatever, so y'all can know when to tune in. But yeah, this is a lot of fire, man. I'm gonna put it in a way that, and then we just pick up where we left off. We just leave off. Yeah, we just pick up where we left off. But I wanted to, before we leave though, I wanted y'all to hear this one part again because that was important as fuck. All right, so is it? Okay, yeah. All right, boom. The serpent was therefore in both countries the most suggestive and appropriate symbol which could possibly have been employed in pictography to convey the idea of dual or quadruple natures embodied in a single figure. Added to this circumstance that to the native mind, the serpent, upon merely shedding the skin, lived again, and we can understand why the ancient Mexicans not only employed it as a symbol of eternal and renewal of or continuation of time and of life, but also combined it with the idea of fundicity, my bad, y'all, fundicity. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. And reproductive. That means reproductive. I'm just fucking up how you pronounce it. But Fecundity. It means reproductive. So I know what it means. It's just fucking up the words. All right, but I appreciate y'all, everybody, for rocking out with me. Oh, what you ain't know, sis? What you talking about? But I appreciate everybody for tuning in, for both of y'all in here. And anybody that might be watching that's not in here, and anybody that's going to come in and watch later on. Appreciate y'all. We're going to build on the next one. I'm probably about to go hop on TikTok. So since you want to catch me over there, I'm going to be over there. I appreciate y'all, man. We're gonna build the next one. Next one should be a little bit better. I'm getting the hang of this. Okay, for sure. Yeah, I'm getting the hang of this. We going on now on the next one. I am gonna do like a little, what do you call that? When you tell what you did last time. I forgot the word right now, but I'm gonna do that. I'm just go over a summary, right? I'm just go over, give you a little summarize of this lesson right here, and then we're gonna go back to this Miko. Miko who? What Miko? My cousin Miko? Or Miko like Chief Miko? Like, I got a cousin named Miko. Real deal. But come on, my cousin. Yeah, all right. But nah, I'm gonna do a recap on this on the next one. Then we're gonna pick up where we left off and continue to build. And we're gonna do, I probably for like each one of these, this booking, I mean, it's kind of long, but we're gonna do probably like 30 pages, 35 pages each session, give people time to digest, even go do the research on what was spoken on. And just know, I mean, go look it up for yourself. Don't believe shit I say. I'm reading from a book. You feel me? But even if I wasn't, don't believe it. Go do the research for yourself. No, like Miko. I hate Miko from TikTok. Oh, I think I knew you, cuz. Salute, 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 family. Salute, family. Appreciate you for tapping in with me. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, we're gonna pick up where we left. We're gonna pick up where we left off this time, next time, and appreciate y'all for stopping in, man. Peace, love, and power. And y'all be good. Be blessed.